Hi, I'm Dave Kites from the OToW Woodshop. This evening we're making a video of a new sled that's just been put in the shop. It's called the 30/30 sled because it's 30 inches square. And I'm going to demonstrate how to use that for you on this video. It's stored over here in this little cubby. And we're going to get it out and put it up on the saw. Now the first thing you want to do if you're going to use that is you're going to move the fence out of the way and set it with this gauge at a little over 18 inches. I'll show you why in a minute. And then take out the guard, as you know how to do that. And lower, make sure the blade is below the tabletop. We don't need a zero clearance plate for using the sled because it's its own zero clearance plate, as you'll see in a minute. So now you got the thing ready, you can go get the sled. The reason we put the fence where we did is it helps us line up the track with the slot. Notice it only has one track, not two. This one. And it's about 18 inches from here to here. So you set this up. Once you get it in there, you're fine. When I put it down, I don't want to put it, I don't want it way up here. There's a stop here, which I'll explain in a minute. But we don't want that up on top of the saw. We want that back behind the edge of the table. And now I've lost my slot. More over there. Okay, so now it's in the slot. Goes fine. So, the sled is for cutting medium-sized pieces, but very precisely and with great stability. You can grip the work much better with the sled and the clamps that go with it than you can just holding it by hand or even holding it by hand on the miter. So if you have a panel that's 12 by 18 and you're pushing it through against just the fence, it's easy to just wiggle a little bit near the end of the cut usually, and then you've got one part of it's not cut straight. Doesn't happen with a sled. Making cutoffs, the same thing. The sled here will hold the thin piece right up against the fence of the sled here, right next to where it's being cut. So there's no extension past the miter. And if you use a backup strip on the miter, you always got to worry if your backup strip is parallel and square. Don't have to worry about those things with the sled. So 18-inch piece this way. So your length of cut for anything you do on the sled can never be more than 18 inches. So you just have to remember that. It can be as long as you want because you can just move the fence out of the way and have it extend over here. You can support it if you want to with another piece of 3/4 inch underneath the end over here so it doesn't droop. But if you clamp it, it probably wouldn't droop anyways. So, height of the blade, normally above the table, it's 3 1/8 inches. We're losing 3/4 of an inch due to the sled. So we got 2 5/8 inch maximum thickness that we can cut on the sled. You can flip it over and try, the old trick. If you cut halfway through, flip it over and you can cut the other half. It just depends on how well you line that up, whether you get a good result or not. So, those are the capacities. And you can make miter cuts with this. I'll show you a couple of ways. It's not real convenient, but you can do it. Make miter cuts, but no beveling, no tilting the blade. This slot, we want to keep this slot narrow and close to the blade. So no beveling on the sled. Mitering, yes. Beveling, no. Use the combo blade that's in here, or use the fine tooth blade, but don't use the rip blade or any other blade with a wider kerf, because the wider kerf is going to take some more of the sled away here in the slot, and we don't want that. So use combo blade, fine tooth blade, and nothing with a wider curve. You can use your own blade, you can use a veneer blade. They're all thinner than this curve, but not ripping and not anything with a wide curve. This red line is approximately the balance point for the sled. Okay? So when you're positioning your wood, you'll see there's only another inch here. At this height, there's only about another inch you're losing on the sled. So most of the time, you're going to have the red line will be up on the table and the sled's not going to tip on you. If you have to pull it all the way back and you got the blade way up, then you're going to need to get a support stand and put it under here, or you can use the FA fence under here. This you remember from other videos, clamps on here. Now I can do that and see I got my support here now. I can pull this way back and it doesn't tip. However, I'm limited in this distance. Okay. So as soon as I get over too far and I lose my support here, then it's no help. And this is about the max I can cut. Goes up from here to the blade. Okay? So just remember that's available. Okay, now let's look at the sled itself. This is a blade house. I call it that anyway. It's a shroud so that when you finish your stroke, most of the blade is in the house. And if this weren't here, it would be sticking out back here and you could be bumping it with your fingers. Okay, so just a little house. This is the stop. You'll notice this hooks over the back edge of the table. It's got a spring in it so it retracts when you pull it back. But if I'm making my cut, it catches on the table and it goes until the red appears. And then it stops. And it stops the sled. So don't be slamming it and breaking this thing. It's pretty rugged, but take it easy on it. That's when you stop. When you stop, the top of the blade is inside the house. And that means that it has done all the cutting it could do on the full width of your material. It'll still be in your material, but it'll be all the way cut to the full height, whatever height you had the blade set at. If you didn't have it set to cut all the way through, it'll still be cutting the full height of the blade. If you have it to set all the way, cut all the way through, it'll be cut all the way through. The full width of it will be. So, those are those. This is a stop. It goes on either side for making repeat cutoffs. Okay, we'll show you more detail. I'm going to make some cuts a little later and you'll see how it works exactly. It's not a flip stop. I didn't buy one. There are still ways that you can get the advantages of a flip stop with this stop, and I'll show you that when we get to it in the cutting. So that's these parts. It's reinforced here so that the two parts of the sled never do any of this or any of this. This part is solid underneath the housing back here for about that many inches, about 3 inches. It's solid, so it's not going to be wiggling back here either. These are all laminated up plywood, and they're quite straight and they're quite stiff. So, a couple other things that you can use with the sled. They're stored in these shelves alongside, underneath the table here. This one is a guard, which drops in here. Oh, it does. What's in the way back there, Ben? It should go right in. Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't get it. Oh well. Anyway, it'll stay up for you like that while you're doing your setup and everything. And then when you're ready to cut, you can bring this down. It goes in this little thing here. And these guys can go up and down, of course. So if I had a piece of wood, like this, okay, and I put this down, okay, notice the whole thing moves. So the wood doesn't have to go along and bump these things up. Wood sits still. So it stays that way, and you just cut it, zing. So it's nuts. It's, as I keep telling people, now that we have the saw stops, if you bump the blade, you're not going to get hurt, but you're going to have to pay. So we still don't want to bump the blade. This is optional. If you don't want to use it, you can just lift it out and not use it. And we also have a hold down. This, go in there. This one, I missed. These are there now, and this is there. So if I wanted to hold this board down, like right there, I run this up, position it over the board, tighten these down, just snug them. You don't have to torque these up hard, just snug them up, they don't move. And then I put this where I want to, hold it against the fence, and that's tight enough. If you torque down on this, you're going to try to bend this. It's going to push down here, it's going to try to bend the sled up like this, and you're going to get distortion. No need for that. Just a moderate torque, and it is stuck, believe me. You're not going to move it. So when you use this, be careful, don't hold it here. If you're trying to hold it really close to the blade, get up here and see. What I'm trying to avoid, obviously, is sawing this. Now, remember that, because not only are you going to damage this piece, but this thing that I built here is really a bolt. And the head of the bolt got ground down smooth, but it's inside this little piece of wood. And if you hit it with this, it's probably going to trip the saw. So you don't want to do that. So just keep this away from that. It'll hold it no matter where it is. So again, this is optional. If you don't want to use it, you can just hold a piece like this. The other thing you can do, and you might do both of these things, this is built so that our ordinary bar clamps will fit on here. And it got a little backing strip on this side so we don't damage this. Little piece of masonite can be replaced when it gets worn out enough, but you can clamp this on like so. You can put as many as you want. You can put one there, you can put one up close here. So clamp this way, hold down that way, you've got a hold of the wood. That's the whole idea, is to keep it from moving. Let's talk about this stop. Let's say I want to make, what, 3/4 inch pieces here. I set this to 3/4. Between this side of the blade and the stop, I'll make 3/4 inch pieces. And I won't have any trouble holding this with my hands. And I could use the guard if I wanted to, okay? And I could just cut them off. But what happens if we just do this? When that gets cut off up here, it's trapped. The cut off piece is trapped between this and this. And we don't want it to be trapped, because if it gets rubbing this part, it can fly out of there. So the easy way to do that is, if you have a flip stop, you know, that's why they make those flip stops. You flip it down, get the piece against it, flip it up out of the way. Well, the poor man's flip stop, if I set this up like this for my 3/4, okay, and I put the stop there, and I hold the wood, Take that out, cut it. It won't be trapped. Got a big gap. Then when you want to cut the next one, put that there, move it over, hold it, cut it. Move it over, hold it, cut it. It's not that much more work, and you won't be trapping your little pieces in here and they won't be flying. Okay. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but you see even this thin strip, when you're going to cut it, it's held up against the fence, even by the pressure of the blade, real close to where it's cut. If I have a miter, the miter ends maybe here, and this strip can do this. And when it hits the saw, it starts to do that. So you don't get as clean a cut. So this is part of the reason for using the sled. And this thing, incidentally, has two little rounded corners. They should be down. It keeps the sawdust from... If that was a tight square corner here and you got a little sawdust in there, it would set your block off a little bit. This way, there's a little room for the sawdust to escape, and it doesn't stick in there. Okay. Again, that can be used on either side. Most right-handed people cut the little pieces off on this side, and it's a shorter side. You can't cut off this long piece on this side as you can on this side using a stop. That's all right. Now, the sled is built pretty well so that this is really perpendicular to here, that whole idea of building a sled. So if I have a longer piece that I want to cut and I can't use the stop because the piece is this long, bring the fence back, okay? And since we didn't move the blade, this gauge on the fence still works perfectly fine. So you can set it and then measure just like you would normally, only instead of using the miter, now we're going to use the sled to hold it, and you see we get much better support, and we can just go along here. And since we're holding it, yes, it's trapped between here and here, but we have a hold of it, so it's not going to go anywhere. Now, I'm going to turn the saw on to do some cutting in a minute, but when you come up like this and you come back, you're okay to do that as long as you got a hold of the piece. But don't come up like that and then just pull it back, because then the piece is going to do like it always does. It's going to twist a little bit like this in this case, and then it's going to really bind, and then it's going to fly out. So hold on to it till you retrieve it. Remember, on this saw, when you're done, the little pieces are still going to be in contact with the blade, so you can't just let go. You got to hold on to it and retrieve it back past the blade. You want to clamp something that maybe you feel you can't hold on to it quite good. Okay? Now, this is pretty tall. I'm not sure. It might be more than you can cut. Well, let's say you wanted to clamp it. You wanted to hold this. Now, that reminds me. I forgot to tell you in the beginning. If you're going to use the sled and you expect to get a 90-degree cut here, you've got to have a straight edge against the fence. This piece that I just picked up, you see it never got finished here. It was a cutoff from a picture frame I made out of rosewood. But anyway, it never got finished here, so it's not straight. When I put it against the fence, see if I pull down here, it's a quarter inch away. If I go here, it's a quarter inch away. Okay, that's not good. Now, if you want to straighten it, you can do that, hold it there, and if you put a little wedgie in here and then use the hold down, right, it's going to hold it well enough that it won't wiggle, and you can cut it, and then you'll have a straight piece there. But that's a real short, straight piece. Didn't help you much. What you have to do with stock like this, if you're going to make cutoffs on it on the sled, is first you've got to true up this side. And you can do that by the other ways that we've talked about in other videos, including other sleds that you can just clamp it to. If it's a really long board that you were going to chop up into pieces, you can use the sled or the jig J that we built. It's called the long board straightening jig, and there's a video for that on the website. It's a big, long, 8-foot long sled. You clamp your board to it with the cut line, a line parallel to the blade, and then you just push the whole thing through it once, and it cuts perfectly straight in one pass, regardless of how crooked both edges were in the beginning. There's another little sled here. I call jig W for weird shaped pieces. This is very similar to the long straightforward straightening jig. The pictures show you, for example. With this, you use these clamps, these hold down, they thread in here and you hold, and these little blocks then go on top of the work and hold it down, and you can cut it straight. And I showed for example, that was clamped down here, and the cut line was aligned with the blade, and you push it through and it cuts it straight. This one has one track, but it runs in the right hand miter. Okay, so for example, this piece of rosewood here, if I wanted to straighten this edge, I can put this on here, and with these clamp pieces I can clamp it down. 1, 2, 3 clamps. Hold it down. It's tippy because I rabbited it already. But I could do this. Put a piece in there, make it parallel if I want to. And then clamp it down, and then I can pass it through once and cut it straight. Then I can bring it over on the sled and chop it up into little bits if I want to. Okay. So. This is down here on these shelves too. The fine-tooth blade, when you're cutting really thin stuff like this, the fine-tooth blade, this is not a bad blade, it's a combo blade, but the fine-tooth blade does even a finer job of avoiding any splintering. So the combination of the fine-tooth blade and the good support you get right next to the cut from the sled makes a very nice cut on fine work. Now, rectangles or cross-cutting wider stock. Again, you need one straight edge put against the fence to get good results. And, well, let's take, for example, these medium-sized panels here. If I wanted to cut this right down, get rid of that stuff, I can do it easily. Here, put my hold down on. I'm not going to take minutes to do. Put it in there, and I would clamp it down like that. And once I had this on it, I think it would be plenty stable enough to just push the sled through and cut that through. Rotate it. True up the other edge. Now I got a square corner now. I know for sure. So it's that simple. Too big. Remember, 18 inches. All you can do. If you got a straight edge, this piece is a sufficient size that will do a pretty good job with the fence. Just this fence. If you wanted to, you could use that weird weird shape cutting jig. I wouldn't get out the 8-foot long jig just to cut that piece, but it would work. Okay, so this panel. When you're cutting off pieces here this way, then of course I would go back and I would use my little stop. And again, I would use, I don't want to trap the piece, so I would use my little spacer piece of some sort. Just use the same piece every time. But have that in there when you set it up, and then hold it, or use your clamp, or use the bar clamp like we did before, or use the hold down clamp, or use both. Put this blade protector in here if you want to. It's all very simple, just showing you the parts. And then if you do this, you can cut this up into all the same. And they'll be very close with the sled. No fiddling around. Odd cross-section stock. A member was asking me the other day, wanted to cut slices off of a 4-inch dowel. I think it was 4 inches. Well, I told her she's got to use the bandsaw because we don't have anything that'll cut 4 inches at once except the bandsaw. If it's a 2-inch dowel, I can do it on here. I can put that dowel right here, along here. Say this was the dowel, and I can put the dowel along here, and then I can, if it's a 2-inch dowel, I would take a piece of wood about 2 inches tall, so it matches the top of the dowel, and then I would put another piece of wood of some sort, probably a little wider than this, across there, and this is on the dowel, remember, and then I would take this guy and make him apply pressure right there. And it'll hold that dowel down, and it won't keep it from trying to rotate when it hits the blade. In addition, you can just put your hands on it and push it through. And you can slice off pieces all day long, use the stop and the alternate thing in here to keep from trapping them if you want to. And then you could slice up that dowel. But 4 inches, no way except the bandsaw. Mitering, different story. One problem with mitering on this small sled is you can't do very big pieces. So picture frames are usually bigger than this unless you're making little pictures. So obviously you have to do something like this. So you got to hold it down. You could take this guy and put him on this side. To hold this end. Okay? And then you could take this guy and put him, I'd put him up here closer to the blade. To hold this guy down and to keep him from slipping a little bit. But if I were really doing this, I would put me another piece in here, like that. And I would hold this piece down. And then I would hold the wood against this piece when I pushed it through. And it won't slip because it's got backup here. Okay? So a little ingenuity of how to brace things and use the vertical clamp and sometimes use the horizontal clamp, although not on angle pieces like that. You can get it supported pretty well. The beauty here, of course, is they'll all be the same length. You have the same width piece here for your frame, and you just want to cut it to size. You can rough cut it so it'll fit on the sled, and then put it on the sled here and cut the miter. As many as you want. Okay. We have a fine adjustment miter. It's a painted blue anyway. You've probably seen it in the shop. And it will adjust to fractions of a degree. And it works pretty well, but you're still holding it by hand in the slot. And it can rock just a little bit anyways. And you have to hold it by hand. Wood can slide. If you try to put a stop on the end, it's not really built for doing that. So this will do it much more secure. But it'll take you a little time to do it. But it'll be more secure. So it's up to you which way you go. Okay. Let's say we wanted to cut pieces of this so we could put them together to make something, okay? And we wanted 4-inch, 5-inch pieces. let's say 4. 4-inch pieces cut off of this. All right. And first I need to see if I got a straight edge. And I look here, just hold it against here, and if it's in contact, it's straight. That edge is straight, and that edge is not. That edge is curved like this. Okay? So we definitely want to guide on this edge. What we'll do is we'll cut them this way, and then we'll cut them to length the other way. And we'll cut off the crooked part. Okay? The crooked end. So if I want 4 inches, I'm going to use this so I don't bind my pieces. So I go like this, and I set this up to 4 inches. Now, if I had exotic wood, and you can push this up till you get to a tooth that's bent in the right direction. You know what I mean? The set on the teeth, some this way, some that way. Although on this combo blade, there's not a lot of set. But move it up till you get right there. That's pretty darn close. Okay. Tighten it. Now, go back. Straight edges against here. I'm just going to do it by hand. I'm not going to use the blade guard. I'm not going to use the hold down, the vertical hold down. I'm not going to use the horizontal clamp. It's pieces this size are just manageable, so you don't have to. So we turn on the saw, wait for him to boot up. Now, what you might do, I'm just looking at this. This is not very straight or smooth. If I want that to be a final edge, I might just make a cleanup cut first. And I think I'll do that. I didn't have to push it all the way through. I could see when it was cut, so I stopped. This stop is not at the end. I could push it further. There. I did not try to retrieve it. I have enough patience. I always like to, with this, when I'm sawing, things like this, is turn the saw before I let go of the stock, if I can, and I could, easily, and wait till the saw stops, and then I move things. If I try to move it while it's still spinning, and I do something like this, you see what happened there? It's going to tear it up, and I ruin my cut. Take a little extra seconds and turn the saw. When it stops, you're not going to mess up your work. So now we know we got a nice square corner. So now we can go back, because we already set this up for 4 inches. And now we've got a nice clean edge that I'm starting with. We go in there, we put this here, we take this out, start the saw. Now, in real life, I usually use chalk. I didn't bring any with me tonight, but this is that crooked edge, you know. I don't want to get mixed up here later when I'm trimming these off, so I would take my chalk and I'd make a little mark. But right now we're just going to do this. And if I put these up on the table here, They're the same. They are the same. Okay. And then you want to trim the other end off. Only this time, if you're right-handed like I am, you probably want to do it this way. I'm going to hold it now, so I don't care if it's trapped between here and here. So I can just set it to whatever length I decided I wanted. And I can do the old-fashioned, oh, let's see, I want 8 inches exactly. Well, I might go over on this side. 8 inches. Okay. Bring that up. Can I see? That's 8. Just touch it. Doesn't have to be gorilla tight, just snug it up. You got it. I'm going to hold it. Now, if you're uncomfortable holding it close, this is too close to the blade for you, use the hold down. I'll go ahead and put it in and show you. You have to get these little, see they're oval? You got to get pointed in the right direction so it'll go in the slot. But it doesn't take much to make them do it. Do this. You could put another little 1/4 inch thick piece that's bigger if you would rather have more. This works. Okay, let's find that piece of cherry here. Piece of very old cherry. I know because I watched the tree grow. I cut it down, I had it cut up, and I made things out of it. Anyway. So there, again, and then protects you from the blade, except we're not even reaching, but there it is. Since I couldn't see whether it was cut all the way through or not, I just pushed it till I got to the stop, and then I knew it was cut all the way through. All the way across. And if I had it higher, I could have cut it in two. So if you want to put slots in boards, now, usually when you put slots and boards for card holders and dominoes and bingo cards and things like that, you want them at an angle. Don't do that on here. Don't bevel on this machine. You're going to ruin this slot when you bevel. Okay, but that works. Well, there's not much else to this. If I think of something else, I'll come back and make a little addendum, but I think we pretty much covered it.